The Virginia Cavaliers have endured back-to-back three-win seasons under Tony Elliott, and it has led a lot of people to start wondering whether or not Elliott is the right man for the job. However, at least on paper, the Virginia Cavaliers are expected to be much better than the previous two iterations of this football team. However, will that on-paper improval lead to on-field success for the Cavaliers in 2024? Well, you're about to find out what I think here in this video. What's up, Tailgaters? You're in the booth with Tailgate Nate today. Welcome to my channel, and thank you all so much for 2,000 subscribers. We hit it earlier today. I believe we actually hit it this morning. I just want to thank you guys so much for that. It really does mean a lot to me. 2,000 really is a big milestone to me. It just shows how many people out there like the content I've put out and want to support it. And speaking of supporting, well, you really can support my channel in any way possible. Continue to hit the subscribe button. Again, I'm predicting all 134 college football teams this summer. Means I'm doing your favorite team if I haven't done so, or even if I have done so and you just want to hear my thoughts on every other team I've yet to do. Got to subscribe, got to ring the bell, especially if you're as big of a college football nerd as I am. Again, you can support the channel by watching the videos, probably the biggest way you can do it, and help support the channel in more ways than you can even imagine. You can also like, comment, share, watch my other videos, and anything else you do to interact with the channel helps to support it. Again, thank you so much for 2,000 subscribers. And now we dive on into the Virginia Cavaliers here in 2024. How do predictions work around here? Well, I'm glad you asked. We'll take a deep dive into the team's offense, into the defense, and at the end of the video, we will go through the Cavalier football schedule and give it a good old game-by-game preview and prediction. But I do have a couple more things before we start, because right over here will be the stats and team put up either offensively or defensively last season. And of course, for your viewing pleasure, right below the team's logo, I have put the team's coaching staff. We'll dive on into talking about the offense for Virginia here in 2024 by talking about the quarterback position first. The passing game was pretty solid for Virginia last season, and it's very interesting entering 2024. We'll explain why here as we preview this offense. You are losing Grady Brosterhouse, a guy that is leaving through the transfer portal, through only one pass last year. Granted, it was a completed 21-yard pass, but only through one pass last year. His transfer destination is unknown, so you replace a guy leaving through the portal with a guy coming in through the portal. New Mexico State quarterback, or I should say former New Mexico State quarterback Gavin Fracas is in the quarterback room for the Cavaliers here in 2024. However, there are a couple returners in this room. Tony Muskett was the figured primary starter coming into last season, but he threw for 1,031 yards, 6 touchdowns, and 5 picks, only 7 yards per completion, and overall was just kind of okay. Enter Anthony Colandrea. I believe he was a true freshman last season who exploded onto the scene and ended up being that primary quarterback for Tony Elliott's group last season. 1,958 yards, 13 touchdowns, and 9 interceptions on 62.6% completion percentage with around 8 yards per completion. If he can develop and he can find his timing a little bit better and he can improve that touchdown to interception ratio, he should be that starting quarterback here for Virginia in 2024 with a full season of work under his belt. Hey, you might hear the name Anthony Colandrea be talking about a whole lot more, and I apologize if I mispronouncing that last name, but he's not going to be talked about as much in the national headlines. Anthony Colandrea has the talent to be a pretty solid quarterback here nationally and a really good quarterback for the Virginia Cavaliers. Definitely a guy that could help take this offense to take a step in the right direction here in 2024. Running back room, you do lose some good talent out of this running back room, including 2 guys that are gone via graduation. Now, no one on this team got over 400 yards rushing last season. The rushing game last year was definitely the struggle of this offense. And Colandrea, by the way, but before we talk about the running backs, we'll continue to talk about him. 225 rushing yards for him last season. He's shown the dual threat ability with the legs as well. But you are losing Paris Jones, and one of the best stories in college football in Mike Hollins. Really tragic what happened to him, but great to see him get on the football field and play last year. That was your top and third leading rusher from last season. Jones being the leading rusher, 5.2 yards per carry, 393 yards and 2 touchdowns, and only had the team's third most carries. He was actually behind Hollins and another guy we'll talk about in carries, and Ahmad Foston, a depth piece, is gone through the transfer portal. Kobe Pace is back. That was the team leader in carries last season, 125 carries for 382 yards and 1 touchdown. You'd like to see him pick up the pace, no pun intended, in 2024. Xavier Brown and Jack Greasy will join him in the running back room for the Cavaliers in 2024. Wide receiver room, my apologies. gone to the NFL is Malik Washington. Your leading receiver from last year was just an absolute stud. 1,426 yards, 9 touchdowns on an almost national high 110 catches last season. You're losing a very reliable target, a very talented target. Malik Washington was quietly one of the better wide receivers in college football last season, and you will be losing him, deservedly so. You will see him playing on Sundays, but you do return another guy that could fill the shoes of Malik Washington this season, and while I'm not predicting him to have 110 catches or 1,400 yards, he's probably going to end up being that number one guy. He had 811 yards and 5 touchdowns, my apologies, on 58 catches last year. That is Malachi Fields. Pretty good talent in that wide receiver room. He'll be joined by Jaden Gibson. I don't know why I can't talk today, and Sudarian Harrison in this wide receiver room, as well as a lot of transfers. Chris Tyree is a very notable transfer coming over from the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, and he could be that top target, but more likely than not, in my opinion, he'll be second behind Malachi Fields. You get Trell Harris, who's coming over from Kent State, Andre Green Jr., who is coming over from North Carolina, as well as I believe a couple other transfers as well. Oh, those are in the tight end room, so we'll talk about them here in a second. In the tight end room, you do lose Sackett Wood Jr., gone to the graduation. I believe a couple other tight ends graduate from last year as well, that being the more notable one in Sackett Wood. Carson Gay does come back, but your 2 primary tight ends probably going to end up being the 2 transfers I alluded to earlier. Sage Ennis is coming over from Clemson, and Tyler Neville, well, he comes over from Harvard. So you got a lot of talent in this pass catching room. Malachi Fields, Chris Tyree, Ennis, and Neville, I think will be 2 pretty solid tight ends, and especially if Calandria can develop, this could end up being a pretty solid pass game for Virginia here in 2024. Offensive line, you don't really lose a whole lot. Justice Johnson does leave through the portal, but I believe every primary starter is back. I could be wrong on that. Johnson, I think, did see some starts last season. Again, gone through the portal. Mikhail Boley, Noah Josie, Brian Stevens, Blake Steen, Ugana Nana, and Ty Furnish all returned, while Drake Metcalf is a guy coming in through the transfer portal. He comes over from the UCF Knights. So again, talking about this offense really quickly, the focus is on Calandria here. He's got a lot of solid talent here. You want the run game to be a little bit better than it was last season, with Kobe Pace leading the charge in that. Malachi Fields, Chris Tyree, Ennis, and Neville, I think are all going to be very reliable targets, as well as Trell Harris and others that are going to be featured in this pass catching room for the Virginia Cavaliers. But you need that run game to take a step up. You probably need the offensive line to take a little bit of a step up as well. They allowed 43 sacks last year, and again, they weren't much more help in the run game last year either. So if Calandria can develop nicely, the offensive line and the run game overall can take a step forward, you're looking at a pretty good Cavalier offense in 2024. Defensively, though, what do you lose and what do you have coming back? Well, there really are no notable losses, at least that I could find, on the defensive line. So you get all of these guys who had very good production for this Cavalier team last season coming back. Jameer Carter was the leading tackler among defensive linemen last year. As a defensive tackle, had 35. Chico Bennett had 34, and you move on down the list. Cam Butler with 3.5 sacks. That was the team lead last season. A pass rush that wasn't that great last year, only 11 sacks, so you're looking for that to improve, as well as the rush defense. But again, a lot more returners: Mekhi Buchanan, Ben Smiley, Michael Diotta, Bryce Carter, and I could go on and on and on. All those guys had pretty solid production for the Cavalier defensive line last season. They're all coming back in 2024. Linebacker room: Aaron Falmouy, and apologies again if I pronounce that last name incorrectly, and Josh Ahern are both going to be gone due to graduation. Aaron, last season, very good linebacker here for this team. He was kind of utilized as a linebacker, defensive lineman. You could really play him anywhere in that defensive front 7, but he had 32 tackles and 3 pass defended last year. Josh Ahern last season, well, he was a pretty solid player in there as well. But you also will be losing him again to graduation. And Langston Long, he is going to be leaving through the transfer portal. Langston Long last season, more of a depth piece, only 8 tackles for him last season, but nonetheless, still a pretty talented piece that you do lose off to the transfer portal. I was trying to find that stat line on Ahern, and I found it here for you, and I just lost. Oh, no, I got it back. 32 tackles, 2 pass defended, 1 interception for the linebacker last season. Again, him with Famui are both gone due to graduation. So who will be in this linebacker room for the Cavaliers in 2024? Well, James Jackson does come back. He was your second leading tackler, had 80 tackles, 5 pass defended. Really good linebacker. He'll be joined back again by Cameron Robinson, 2 interceptions with 71 tackles. He was your third leading tackler last season. You also do get Stevie Bracey, Trey McDonald coming back as well to give it some depth. And Dorian Jones is a Cincinnati transfer that had a really good season last year at UC, coming over to UVA. I think is going to have some really good playing time and get some really good solid production for this Cavalier defense. Cornerbacks and safeties, otherwise known as your defensive back room. A lot of graduates in, I'd say a lot of graduates in this room. Tavon Kyle is going to be gone, 53 tackles, 5 pass defended last season. Dave Herrard and Sem Westfall are some other corners that you will not see playing football for the Cavaliers as they've run out of eligibility. They have graduated. Herrard last year, right there up in tackles, 40 tackles last season. He was a top 10 tackler. Westfall had a pick last season for the team. And Cohen King in the safety room, your fourth leading tackler, 60 tackles, also 5 pass defended, is gone out of the safety room. Again, run out of eligibility. He has graduated. So Malcolm Green does come back here in the cornerback room, only 15 tackles for him. Dre Walker does come back, and again, with all those graduates leaving, you needed to get some guys over from the transfer portal, and that is exactly what they did. Kempton Shine is going to be coming over here to this program. He is over from Eastern Michigan, and Kendron Smith is over from an FCS school from the Ivy League from UPenn. So those are 2 guys that'll play corner for the Cavalier defense this season, and it's a bunch of returners in the safety room, as well as 1 transfer piece coming in. That is Corey Thomas Jr. I believe a community college JUCO transfer could end up seeing some solid minutes, but you return a guy that led the team in tackles, broke triple digits with 107, and pass defended last season. That was Jonas Sanker, while Antonio Clary, Caleb Hardy, and Micah Gaffney also all come back. And hey, kickers are people too. You know I like to show them some love. No notable losses in the special teams room. So Daniel Sparks comes back to do the punting, and Will Bettridge is back to be the primary place kicker for the Cavaliers here in 2024. Only missed 3 field goals and no extra points last season. So overall, when you talk about this defense, well, this is the side of the ball that you're really looking on to improve the most. Yes, there is a lot of good returning talent, and I think they did fairly well in the transfer portal, but you need to get more pressure to the quarterback. That rush defense has to be better than it was last season. How do the transfer pieces fit into this defensive back room? I think all of that will be something very interesting to watch with this Cavalier defense in 2024. And now we dive on in to the schedule. All right, if you don't know how this works yet, I'll go ahead and break it down for you. Any game at home is going to be underlined, while any game on the road is in italics. For those of you that don't know what that is, it's the slanted text. Any game you see in green is going to be a game that I think the Cavaliers are going to win fairly easily. Any game in yellow is going to be a close competitive game, but I still think the Cavaliers are going to be able to win, and any game in red is a loss. So it starts out with a week 1 game against the Richmond Spiders, an FCS level team that, albeit, is going to, I believe, be one of the better FCS teams this season. Do believe they lose some solid talent, but overall, again, I like this Virginia offense, and it's a nice test game here to see how much this defense has improved, to get some of those fundamentals down, because you jump into ACC play right away with a team that I fully believe you can contend with in the Wake Forest Demon Deacons. I think Wake Forest is going to end up being a pretty solid team this year. They can be pretty competitive. The Demon Deacons have some really solid talent. There are some huge pieces coming back, both offensively and defensively, but they have a lot of question marks on this team as well. However, with this one going on the road, with maybe some new defensive philosophies and everything not quite settled in yet, some of the transfers still trying to find their role, I think Virginia goes on the road and loses this game to Wake Forest. I think the Demon Deacons are going to be a harder team to beat than some people may be giving them credit for here in 2024, and I think especially with that being the first road game of the year, Virginia is going to go on the road and lose that one before they have to come back home to play a non-conference game against a Power 5 team in the Maryland Terrapins. Maryland had a really good defense last year. It still will have a lot of question marks because it loses a ton of talent. And look, we know that Maryland's defense, as the year goes on, at least recent trends have shown that it has just taken steps back. And now the offense has some question marks as well, because Taulia Tungavailoa is gone. You bring MJ Morris into play quarterback. You still have a lot of very talented pieces there. And overall, I think Maryland's offense still will prove to be a little too much for this Virginia Cavalier defense. And hey, MJ Morris is an NC State transfer. He's played against Virginia before. We'll see how that works out in his favor. I think it does nicely. Virginia loses that one at home to the Maryland Terrapins. Again, another game in which I think they can be competitive and win. Then you got to go on the road and play the Coastal Carolina Chanticleers. And even though I have this one being a win for Virginia, this also could be a spot where I think Virginia could go on the road and lose. However, Coastal Carolina does not have one very key weapon. Grayson McCall is gone, and I actually mentioned NC State earlier. That is where he is going to be. A couple of the top wide receiver weapons for Coastal Carolina are gone, and while Bennett and some other really good skill position players do come back, you have some solid pieces on defense. I think Virginia will be up to the task. They go on the road. They get a big road win against the Coastal Carolina Chanticleers before the true full long haul of the ACC play does start. And you start out with, again, another game that I think is very, very manageable here. I think the Boston College Golden Eagles are a very winnable game for the Virginia Cavaliers. Sadly, though, I do not think that that one comes to fruition. I do not think that you win that game. Watch out for Thomas Castellanos. I think he's going to end up being a pretty solid piece to Boston College this year. They did pretty well for themselves in the transfer portal, especially in the defensive back room, and I think that's exactly where Boston College wins this game. I think they're going to be able to slow Calandria and this Virginia passing attack. The run game's going to have to be pretty substantial here to help out Calandria and this passing game. But again, the Boston College defensive back group, they're looking really good in 2024. I got the Eagles winning that one over the Cavaliers. Next two games, though, are games that I just don't think, by the way, you do get an extra week of preparation there for that Boston College game, so definitely could be a game there where Virginia, again, is able to win. Every game on the schedule so far has been winnable for the Virginia Cavaliers. The next two, I think, are going to be really, really tricky. You do get Louisville at home, but Jeff Brom's squad is projected to be one of the better teams in the ACC yet again this season. Yes, Jack Plummer is gone. Yes, Jawar Jordan and Isaac Arendo are gone. Yes, you do lose Jamari Thrash, some really good defensive pieces. They were one of the teams that hit it out of the park in the transfer portal. They got some really good pieces coming in there to that team, and Louisville will be back competing for an ACC title again here in 2024. That's a loss for the Cavaliers, and they'll go on the road and lose to the Clemson Tigers as well. I think Cade Klubnik and Garrett Riley are going to see a year two jump in offensive production. That Clemson defense has still been really, really good. No, not at the elite level that it has when Clemson was competing regularly for national championships, but Clemson's still going to be one of the better teams in the ACC, and I think that Clemson wins that game. So, okay, you have 5 losses. You can afford one more before you have to try to win things out here and get to a bowl game. And winning 4 or 5 with that stretch, yeesh, that's going to be a really hard bargain to ask, but I think they started out really, really nicely here. To me, there's no question that North Carolina is going to be a more talented team than Virginia this year, at least on paper. But college football isn't won on paper. College football is won on the field, and this is just one of those feelings I have. I think Virginia is going to be able to upset North Carolina. The Tar Heels lose a lot of production from last season, both offensively and defensively, most notably in quarterback Drake May. And while there are, again, a lot of talented pieces there, Max Johnson is a guy that can be turnover prone at times. This is a North Carolina defense that has seen struggles, even with some really, really good pieces. Just spoiled my next prediction there for you. But North Carolina's defense has struggled even with some really, really good pieces. I think this is a spot for an upset, and I think Virginia gets it. They beat North Carolina in week 9, and you already saw that next pick, so I'll go ahead and flash it up. They lose to Pitt in week 11. By the way, I'm noticing now that Virginia's schedule set up very nicely. You have 4 games in the bye week, 4 games in the bye week, and then 4 games to close out the year. Kind of how you want it to happen here when you have 2 bye weeks in a college football season. But regardless, I think Virginia goes on the road and loses at Pitt. It's a Panther team that just had everything go wrong for them last season. They won't have as many things go wrong for them this year. Again, another game where I feel like Virginia can hang with and compete in, as I still think Pitt is going to have to pull some things out to get to a bowl game this season just because of how much defensive talent they do lose. Virginia's offense projected to be pretty solid this season, but I think the battle in the trenches wins this one for Pitt. The defensive line beats the Cavalier offensive line, and Pitt wins that game. Even though you have this game at home, you're not going to beat the Notre Dame at Fighting Irish. It's much like the Louisville or Clemson game for me. I just think it's going to be really, really hard for you to win. Marcus Freeman's group is set up exceptionally well here in 2024. They're going to have a really, really good defense led by cornerback Benjamin Morrison. You have Riley Leonard coming in to play quarterback. Really good stuff from Notre Dame this season. That is a loss. And then your last 2 games of the season, I have being losses as well. Preston Stone is a really, really good quarterback who could come in and light the the ACC on fire, and SMU's got a lot of speed offensively and defensively. The Ponies beat the Cavaliers, and I do think Virginia loses to their rival at home in the Virginia Tech Hokies as well. Hokies projected to be one of the better teams in the ACC as well here in 2024. They got a lot of returning pieces offensively, defensively. Kyron Drones is back. Brent Pry's this team building in a phenomenal direction. And Enter Sandman is going to be as loud as ever in Blacksburg this season. So I have another 3-win season for the Virginia Cavaliers, which is really, really, really tough to say because I do think that this is a Virginia team that is going to be better than it was over the past 2 seasons. This is a team that is going to show improvements. They're going to get better. They did really well in the portal, and maybe they get an extra win or two that I am not predicting. Again, they can hang with Wake Forest. They can hang with Maryland. They can hang with Boston College, but I think ultimately it's another 3-win season, and who knows what happens to Tony Elliott at the end of the year. But I want to know what you guys think about the Cavaliers in the comment section below. Remember to play hard but tailgate harder, and in the next video, I believe we will be talking about the Houston Cougars. Goodbye.